All right. So 10.2, time value of money. So, for instance, what is this going to be about? So since we've gone through cash, we've gone through dealing with receivables. This section, time value of money, is where we are going to be taking a look at investments and loans. Okay? Because this is very, very important that you do need to know, because making investments into, so whether it's making like an investment into the company itself, or making an investment in a bank bond. So yes, there are many ways that we can obtain money through those kind of securities. So then we have some reserved money, right? But this is also more geared towards taking loans. What are the risks of taking loans? And that's exactly what we're going to look at, is the value of our money. How does it change over time? Okay, so that's exactly what time value of money is going to be representing. So as we know, over the years, we know that our dollar is changing its value over time. Now here's the key factor. But we know that from the accounting assumption, when we're looking at monetary unit, even though the value of a dollar changes over time, we still use a dollar as if it's still a dollar. That is the key point there, that we use a United States dollar bill, because at the end of the day, a dollar is still a dollar. But the way that we understand how the value of the dollar has changed over time is because, of course, back then, 20, 30 years ago, gas was only 99 cents. And look at it now. It is $7 right now. $6 or $7. Very close. So thinking of that, that was in a span of 30 years. That is where we measure how the money of our dollar changes over time. Okay? Now, of course, all of those is due to anything like something that impacts society, right? So whether it's inflation, whether it's a recession, depression, or even an economic upbringing. Okay? So that is exactly why we need to take a look at looking at the dollar and seeing it, what happens if you measure the dollar in the future. It's not going to be $10,000 now. It's going to be valued way more in the future. So that is exactly what we're looking at today. We're not taking into consideration of inflation or recessions or anything like that, but we are taking a look at how can our $1 expand over time when we either invest, or in other instance, how do we get charged interest when we owe money, right? How does a dollar become $2 that you have to pay when you owe somebody money, right? So that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today, is interest. Okay? So we have two types of interest. We have simple interest and we have compound interest. So for the first half, we're going to be looking at investing into bonds and looking at, excuse me, taking a loan, right? Because those are the more common ones that you normally would see that are currently accruing interest, right? So simple interest, pretty straightforward. You only get calculated interest one time, okay? Where where compound interest, you are getting hit with interest multiple times, okay? Now, interest, when I would talk about getting hit with interest, I'm talking about an annual percentage, okay? That annual percentage is being calculated multiple times under compound interest. But for simple interest, it's only calculated once. Now, a typical example of a simple interest that's currently being used is when you purchase bank securities or bank bonds, right? When you invest, they don't accrue as much interest, or a savings account. That's the better example for a simple interest where you're only going to get calculated interest once. Okay? So here are the variables that you need to know. You have a principal. Okay? Your principal is going to be what you originally invest. Okay? Interest, okay, is usually a percentage. It's a rate. Okay, so usually this is an annual percentage. So oftentimes you'll see the percentage and you'll see APR. That stands for annual percentage rate, unless stated otherwise. Now, most likely, you are more likely to occur a annual percentage more than a monthly percentage. They usually tell you as an annual percentage, nothing more, unless it's specified. But like I said, it's more commonly known as an APR. And of course, you have the time, T, time of the length of time that you are investing. Okay, usually measured in years. Okay, so that's simple interest. And then, of course, when we take a look at compound interest, we have the same exact variables except for one extra variable. You have N, which is the number of times compounded, meaning how many times you're going to be calculated this interest. Okay? So for now, let's go ahead and just take a look at one of the interests here. We're going to take a look at simple interest. Okay? So here is the equation as well as the formula. Now, here is something that's important that you need to know. Simple interest is very straightforward. You can be able to do this on a calculator, right? So simple interest is, okay, so if you want to solve for interest, it's interest is equal to principal times rate times time, okay? And the future value is going to be your principal plus your interest, right? Now, if you have some kind of mnemonic device for this, right, you could say pretty, right? For simple interest, it's pretty, right? Because you do P times R times T equals I, pretty. Future value is going to be your, you just add the original investment to your interest. So in this case, this is the simple interest formula. So down below, okay? So let's actually take a look at an example, okay? So every time we go ahead and journalize that we obtain a bank bond, okay? So in this case example here, that you bought a bank bond that's worth $100,000, right? And of course, the interest rate is 6% and can be redeemable at 5 years. Okay, so in this case, as soon as I acquire my bank bond, right? Boom, right? I had to pay for it. Bank security, boom. Okay. Then, as I go and calculate this, I have to figure out what is my grand total interest I will be collecting in 5 years. So here we got to determine the principal. Well, I originally invested in a $100,000 bond. My interest rate was 6%, and it could be redeemable in 5 years. So there you go. Everything is in, we got the percentage. We have to convert it into decimal, right? To make so it may easier to calculate. And it's already in 5 years. So in this case, what I got to do is I got to punch it in my calculator. 100,000 times 0.6 times 5, right? That's how I figure how much interest I will be collecting. So if I go ahead and do that, I get a total of $30,000. So plus my original investment of 100,000, you're going to get $130,000. Okay? And of course, when I need to redeem it in 5 years, because the thing about bank bond securities is you cannot redeem them until it has aged. Okay? So we call yield. Once it's been yielded, then you can go ahead and redeem it. So that's the thing about that. So it's very similar to IRA accounts, right? You can't touch your money until a certain amount of time. Okay, so there you go. So I am redeeming my money 5 years later. I should be collecting $130,000, and I would credit my bank security, and I would also credit interest income because I earned interest on top of it. So this is an example of how we can see how our dollar, right, that we invested originally, $100,000, fast forward 5 years, we'd be able to generate $30,000 on top of that. Okay? Now this is a very bad example, okay? Because 6% is actually a very high rate, and most bank securities are maybe 2 or 3%, or even 1.5%. It doesn't generate that much, but there are some unsecure securities that you can invest in, okay, that can generate you higher percentages, but it's just more risk. Okay, but this is just an example of how we can see our dollar change value in a span of 5 years or over time, right? We invested $1, we generated $6, right? 10 years later or 5 years later. All right, so that is what I am trying to have you guys understand, is this is time value money, and this is what real businesses do, especially when they invest. Okay, so that's simple interest. So let's talk about compound interest. Compound interest is definitely more complicated. So here's the example, right? It is we decided to invest in a bank bond worth $100,000, and the interest rate is 6%, and it's compounded quarterly. Okay? And it can be redeemable in 5 years. Journalize the purchase of the bank bond in 2015. So there you go. Same journal, but this time we have a new component. We have a new variable. We're being compounded quarterly. So again, we take a look at our formula. This is what it is. Your compound interest is going to be interest is equal to future value minus principal. But how do you solve for your principal? Or I'm sorry, how do you solve for your future value? Your future value is going to be your principal times parentheses 1 plus 1, your rate over the number times compounded parentheses up to the power of your number of times compounded times time. Okay, so then down here, formula. You cannot punch this in a calculator. You do need a graphing calculator to be able to do this formula. Okay? Now, I'm not gonna say go buy one, okay, because it's $100. No. However, if you know how to use Excel, you'd be able to go ahead and punch this into Excel, because Excel allows you to do this. So that's exactly why we got to use our resources. I believe you can also look up a graphing calculator online. I'm very certain that you can find a digital one that would be able to calculate this for you. Okay. So just keep in mind that this is something that you may or may not be able to calculate, especially if you don't know how to use Excel or you don't have the capabilities of using Excel. Now, I am unsure if you're able to calculate this formula using Google Sheets. Even though they are very similar, this formula right here might be too complex. Okay? So in this case, how would I calculate this? So in this case, here you go. We have to figure out what our variables are. What's my principal? $100,000, right? That's my original investment. My rate is 6%, which is 0.06. The number times compounded. If I'm being compounded quarterly. How many times is that a month? A year, excuse me. How many times is that a year if it's being compounded quarterly? 4, right? Quarters of a year, quarterly. Therefore, you're going to get compounded 4 times. And then, of course, it's redeemable in 5 years. So there you go. Now we need to plug it into this formula here for my future value. So in this case, I show you how to do it on Excel because that is exactly why this class, you're supposed to actually have the Excel class prior to this, or if you already have the Excel experience, this is the formula that you're going to be needing to use. And in this class, remember, we will be using Excel. So in this case, this is the formula you have to punch in. And it's very specific. If you miss a component in here, you will get errors in your formula. Okay? So that means this is how you got to punch it in. You got to do your P, which is your principal. You do the asterisk or the star. So if you have a number keypad, you'd be able to do all this right here. So the star, then you have to do your parentheses. It's important that you count the number of parentheses that you put into your formula, because if you miss one parentheses, again, you will mess up your formula. So it's important that you say parentheses 1 plus parentheses r divided by n parentheses, and this is a caret. This is your shift 6. So you go parentheses, or yes, your shift 6. Oops. Okay. Your shift 6. Okay. Then open parentheses, n times t, close parentheses. Now, Excel does flag you, like they color code all the parentheses so you don't make a mistake. But in this case, that's why you have to count how many parentheses that you have, because it's called a syntax error if you're missing one. Syntax meaning there's a specific order that you want to be able to calculate your formula. I need to know what my rate divided by my number is first, and then I need to add it to my 1, and then I need that whole thing to be up not square rooted, but up to the exponent power, okay? And then, of course, I need that separated to let me know that I need to do n times t, okay? So in this case, we can do 100,000, parentheses 1 plus the rate of 0.06 divided by 4 up to 4 times 5. And then, of course, that will give you $134,685.50. Okay? And of course, how much interest have I collected? Straightforward. It's principal minus, it's future value minus principal. So in this case, I take out my future value and I take out my original investment. So that will leave me with $34,685.50. Okay. Now, not always will your compound interest make you more money, okay? It really depends on the percentage rate, but it also depends on the length in time. Now, again, most common ones that you normally see for compound interest is usually when you take out a loan, because they are constantly recalculating every single interest percentage every single month, right? Or whatever, how many days that you agreed to. But most likely, if you're making loan payments, it's every single month. So they compound you 12 times a year. So you're not going to be generating that much more extra money. But what I'm trying to say is that depending on what the situation is, what your interest rate is, will determine how much more money that you will encounter. So in this case, I earned $34,000. So $4,000 more than if I were to just do simple interest, which was only calculated once. Okay, this is calculated the interest 4 times. So how do I redeem it? Straightforward. I would do checking, my bank security, and again, interest income. All right. Any questions so far about interest?
No.
Okay, so that's interest income, earning the interest. So let's go ahead and see how does interest actually be calculated. So a great example that I'm going to be teaching you for compound interest is what happens when we do look at how our money's generated, or in this case, how interest is actually earned. Okay. So of course, when we talked about that bank bond that we borrow, or excuse me, that we purchased for $100,000, right? How do I see that money grow? Well, in this case, right, if we know and understand that we're being calculated this quarterly, this is what happens. So on January, when you acquire it, right, this is a breakdown of how your interest is being collected. So if I were to go ahead and do a bank bond, right, usually when you purchase the bank bond, as soon as you acquire it, you don't hit interest because it hasn't been accrued yet. You haven't started the day that you're going to be accruing it. So in this case, usually for the first month, you're not going to be calculated interest at all. Okay? So right now, it's still at 100,000. So then, because we are being compounded every quarterly, right? Let's go ahead and see how much money you're going to be actually being calculated. So in this case, quarter from now is going to be March. So you're going to take your 100,000, right? Now the interest rate, since we know it's 6%, right? We need to figure that out in terms of how many times that you're going to be calculated the interest over a year. We know it's going to be 4 because it's quarterly, right? So since my annual percentage of 6% is for the whole year, we're going to take that and divide it by the total number that you're being compounded for. So in this case, since I'm going to be compounded every 3 months, so 4 times a year, I'm going to split my rate into 4. Okay? And that's going to give me 0.015. Okay? So there you go. That's my percentage for every 3 months. Okay? So if I calculated 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, right, for a whole year, it would equal up 6%. Okay? So then all I do is very simple. Principal times rate. What is 100,000 times 0.015? That gives me $1,500. So then, add that to there. Now, my principal is $101,500. And then you're going to rinse and repeat. Next month. Now I got to take my principal because it's going to be accruing on top of what you're earning. So in this case, I have 101,500. I get that interest rate and I add it together or multiply together. Now it's $1,522.50. And I add that to my principal. And so if you calculate this all the way through to the 5 years, that is exactly how you generate and accrue that interest. Right? So if you can't calculate it via using your Excel, you could go ahead and create a table like this so you can eventually get to the answer. It will just take a lot longer and a lot more calculations. Okay? But that's exactly what you're doing. You are taking the interest rate and you are going to calculate it based on how many times you're going to be calculating against the principal. Okay? And So for one whole year, it racked up to be 10,000 $104,567.84. Okay. So if I were to do this all the way, like I mentioned, all 5 years. So again, so this is like at the end of the fifth year. This is what you have so far, and you're gonna end up with that exact number of 134,685.50 cents. So remember, that's the same thing if you were to do this formula down below. Okay, much quicker. But in this case, if you were to do it by hand, that is how you accrue this interest. Okay, this is for compound interest. Okay, so any questions about how the interest is being calculated?
No.
Now let's talk about what is the difference between that was just collecting interest. That is me generating interest. Now we're going to flip over a page because now let's see a more common one that we normally see is where interest payments and loans, okay? Because when we borrow money, what is the interest that's being calculated on that? Okay? So this is where if we borrow a loan, this type of interest is different from the interest that you are collecting. Okay? When you're paying interest, it is already pre-calculated. Okay? So this is how I'm going to show you how to calculate the interest if you borrow money. How is it being calculated and how much is being generated? Okay? So in this case, right, we're going to take a look at a regular bank bond or a bank loan. So again, if you're applying for a bank or a business loan or a credit card, right? This is the situation, right? It's very crucial that you do know because some of those loans that you do take, how much interest are you actually paying, right? So that's why this is a very important business overview in regards to understanding how loans work. This is exactly what I'm going to be showing you today. So this is the formula on how you figure out how much compound interest, because we all know loans, you're getting hit with interest multiple times for sure, because these credit loans lenders are trying to get the most money out of you. So in this case, this is the formula, right? Your interest is going to derive from your future value minus your principal. But of course, your future value is actually going to be payments times the number of payments, which is going to be payments is equal to this big, huge formula right here, right? I am not going to read that, but in this case, it is a very complex. And same thing here. No, you are unable to do this on a regular calculator. Okay? But it is very important that you do know because Excel also allows you to have built-in formulas so you can figure this number out using the formulas that are preset in Excel. But of course, my job isn't to teach you how to use Excel with their formulas. It's how you actually read this formula to be able to derive to the amount of money that you will be actually paying towards interest. Okay. So there's a few rules and regulations that maybe you guys do know, maybe you guys don't know. When you borrow a loan, your interest is already pre-calculated. What does that mean? They calculate the total amount of interest that you're going to be calculating or that you're going to be paying and include it into your principal before you even accept the loan. So in this case, you're not racking up the interest. You already have the payment, the interest already included into your loan automatically. Now, just because on paper it says that you only owe $50,000, it's already been calculated for you because you have a deadline after that, right? You have to make your monthly payments on time. And because that monthly payment, they've already pre-calculated for you how much your monthly payment is, it already includes the interest. So that's the thing that you have to be careful about is don't think this because it's not true. Don't think that the faster you pay your loan, the less interest you are going to accrue. That's not true. They already calculated the interest ahead of time, added it to your principal, and then they're dividing it by the number of payments that you're making. Okay? So a lot of banks and a lot of credit lenders, they don't tell you this because they think, oh, I'm going to borrow $50,000. My interest is 4%. Great. I'm going to pay it in 2 years. Or you got approved for a 3-year loan, right? No, they've already calculated the interest and they are expecting you to pay the interest on top of your principal. Okay, so that is something that you need to be aware of and be careful because that is really going to you're going to be spending the money that you don't know that you're already spending. Okay, that's the price of borrowing money from large credit lenders. Okay, it's because they trick you by already including the interest, even though on paper they tell you, oh, you're only at $50,000. No, you're actually already at 57,000 already. They already include the interest, and you're just slowly paying it off, right? So what do I mean by that? How do I see that interest actually accrue? So in this case, here you go. The example here is that you decided to borrow a bank loan for $10,000 and it has a interest rate of 4.75% APR and it is compounded every month. So that means 12 times a year. And of course, the bank approves the loan and it expects to be paid off in 5 years. So they've already calculated it for you, right? That in 5 years you'll pay off your loan. So in this case, this is what happens. You borrow money, you get money. So you have bank bonds, or sorry, bank loan, and you got the money for $10,000. Okay. So then now let's go ahead and apply that the numbers into our formula because it's the same numbers because it's compounded, right? So principal $10,000. The rate is 4.75%, so it's going to be converted to 0.0475. You're going to be compounded every month, so it's 12 times a month, and you have 5 years to pay back this loan. So you're going to plug it into this complicated formula, right? I'm not going to be testing you on this, so that's why. So that's why I'm going through this quickly, but it's very interesting to know. It's really interesting to know because, again, our life, we could be taking business loans, student loans, just personal loans. What is the price we have to pay for that? Well, so now that I pop that into my formula, so now my payments is going to tell me that I will be making payments of $178.57. Okay? Now, if you were to use this formula and calculate it to tell me how my future value is, right? My future value is going to be, right? Remember, payments times number of times compounded times time, right? In this case, if I know that I have $178.57 and I multiplied that by my n, which is 12, times the number of years I'm going to be having this loan for is 5. Multiply that, my future value is going to be $11,254.20. How much did you borrow? You borrowed $10,000, right? So by the time you finish paying off your loan 5 years, you've already paid back the interest included. So that is exactly why you need to be very careful when you borrow loans and things like that because guess what? Interest is already calculated. You don't accrue it. It's already calculated into your your principal already. Okay, so there you go. So by the end of the 5 years, I'm already racked up at $11,254.20. And of course, how do I figure out my amount of interest I'm going to be paying? I'm going to pay $1,000 and $254.20 on a $10,000 loan. So think about it. That right there is almost an extra $1,500 I have to pay on top of borrowing this $10,000 loan. Now, be mindful. This 4.75% is being generous. Okay? Many credit card loan companies their interest rate can be extremely high because it depends on how much money, or it depends on your credit score, right? If you get approved of a low rate, great. But in most cases, 4.75% is being generous. Okay? Home loans can be, I think, up to 5%, I believe, but that's because you're borrowing a lot more money than a simple $10,000. Okay? $10,000 for a 4.75% interest is a very lucky number. Most people, right, can rack up their interest up to 10%, and for credit cards can be up to 28%. Actually, no, close to 30% now that the interest rates have gone up. Credit cards, store credit cards, or even bank store credit card or bank credit cards, right? If you go to Chase, you go to Citibank, even going to Capital One, their highest interest rate can go all the way up to 30%. So think about it. This number's just being very generous. So in this case, this $10,000 loan that you borrowed for 4.75% is only going to be producing you $1,200 worth of interest. But imagine if you borrowed $5,000 and your interest rate is 28%, how much money are you going to be racking up every month for interest? Okay, so that's why it's good to know this formula. So then if you are making a executive decision, right, are you going to take a student loan? What is the student loan that's going to give you the less interest? You have a bunch of options, right? Use this formula to calculate it. Or a bank loan, business loan, personal loan, whatever it is that you are calculating, you have an advantage because you know what you're getting out of it. Where the credit lenders are not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you. They say, oh, you're going to just borrow $10,000. Your interest is going to be 5%. So you're only paying like $100 every month. No, calculate it, right? So that's how much interest I'd be racking up after 5 years, right? So how does interest is being calculated? Like I've mentioned before, if you're unable to calculate it that way, we would be able to show you step by step of exactly how your interest is being collected, especially when you're making payments. Okay, so this is where we'll show you right here what happens when you make your payments, right? So in this case, the same exact sample where you borrow that $10,000 loan with a 4.75% interest. So again, usually always when you start on your first month, you never get charged interest. It's always the month after, right? Because that's the rule there. The rule is that you get a grace, that you since you're starting out your loan, you don't get the interest right away because you haven't accrued it. Okay, so in this case, here you go. I borrowed the $10,000 loan. So in the month of January, I'm okay. Now let's see what happens when I receive my first bill, right? So if I receive my first bill and they tell me that my first bill is monthly payment is $187.57 and it's due on February 5th. So how do I go ahead and calculate this? Okay. So I start off with my principal. Okay. And then now I need to figure out my rate. So since I know this much that my rate is an annual percentage, right? I have to divide it by my number times compounded, right? Because that's how we figure out what my percentage rate is for that month. So in this case, I'm going to take my 4.75% and I'm going to divide it by 12 because that's going to tell me how much money I'm going to be calculating for that month. So in this case, I get 0.003958 and I do principal times rate. So I racked up $39.58 worth of interest for that month, right? And then, so that means my current balance tells me that I owe $10,039.58. Okay? So let's actually see what happens when we actually make that payment. So if I decided to make that payment of $187.57, how does what portion goes to my goes to the actual current balance? Well, here's also something that you may or may not know. You always pay the interest first. So your $187.57 will always pay the interest first. And then whatever is remaining will pay your principal, will actually go towards your principal. So if you ever have a credit card, right, and they tell you, oh, your minimum payment is $25. If you continue to keep paying that $25 minimum, you're only paying to cover the interest. You will never ever start paying towards your principal until you pay more than the minimum. So that's why a lot of people who get those credit cards that always just pay the minimum never see their money go down, because what happens? The next billing cycle comes around, you got charged $21 worth of interest. Guess what? Your minimum payment is $25. I pay $25. You only covered the interest that you were charged that month, and $2 towards your actual principal. So that's exactly why it's very imperative that you do know this, that never pay the minimum. Don't even pay above the minimum. Try to pay off your amounts, or choose to pay off your amounts as much as you can. Okay? That will actually affect your payment at the end of the day, right? Your actual principal. So in this case, I'm making a payment to my bank loan, right? But because I have to incur interest expense, and then of course I'm going to make a payment out of my checking account. So I know for a fact I'm making a payment of $187.57. If I know that I was actually charged interest of $39.58, how much is actually going to go towards my principal? Well, only $147.99 is actually going to go towards my principal. Okay? So that's exactly what I mean. And then once you do that, you make your payment. Now I'm only down to $985,201. Here's the catch. If you don't make payments, you're getting interest calculated on top of interest on top of counting interest. So you're double paying the interest if you choose not to pay. So for those, if you remember, right, a lot of credit card companies give you that grace period saying, hey, we won't charge you interest for a whole year. Yeah, don't buy into that, because that's not, they may not report you, but the more money that you spend, the more higher the interest is going to hit you much harder, especially if they're compounding you every single month. Okay? So that's why I'm saying here, like, even though you paid off the interest, you're going to get it compounded, meaning you're going to take that principal for the next month, and it's going to be calculated for that interest rate one more time. So in this case, right, you're racking interest on top of interest if you only pay the minimum. Okay? So in this case, they already included the interest in there, plus a little partial payment, because they're saying that you have 5 years to pay this off. So this one is a little slightly different than credit card payments, because credit card payments, as long as you make your monthly payment or your minimum payment of X amount of dollars, The more you spend your credit card, the more you're going to have to accrue that interest. Where a loan, you can't keep borrowing the money, right? It's already borrowed, you're paying it back. So that's also a slight difference there. But what I'm trying to say is it's the same exact concept. Same exact concept. Okay? So there you go. So for the next month, I'm going to take the current balance that I have, because that's my new principal now. Gonna multiply by that rate. So now I get hit with another interest for the month of March for $39 even. And now it's 989 or $9,891.01. Boom, you make a payment, boom, then it's going to be down to here. So again, you're going to pay the interest off first, and then you slowly make a payment to your actual principal. Okay, so if you do want to pay your loan off significantly quicker, great. Just know that that interest is already pre-calculated, so you won't be able to um, pay less interest. Okay, so make sure that you do know that, because some people think that, oh, if I pay my loan off quicker, I won't get hit interest. No, it's already calculated. It's already included in your principal. You just don't know that. They don't tell you that. So there you go. So fun fact there. So every time you make a payment, the best way to do it is, yes, if you want to have less worry about this, pay back. And how do you pay back? Well, for the first payment, make the payment as regular. Make a second payment, and what you can do is call the bank and tell them that my second payment, I want it to go towards my principal, because the second payment will allow you to do that. That means your $187.57, the second time you make that payment, will actually go towards your principal, because you've already paid the monthly interest from the first payment. Okay? So, fun fact, if you really want to make your loan payments quicker, that's the best way to do it. But again, you won't be able to escape the interest. All right, it's already pre-calculated. Okay, and of course you do the whole calculations, and then you end up going to that perpetual cycle where you're constantly racking up the interest, and then you're constantly paying. And then of course, if you reach the end of your 5 years in this case, right, the more you keep paying, the smaller the money will reduce. But at the end of the day, you're going to have a whole list of all the interest that you've collected, and watch, calculate it. It's going to be equal to that $1,000 that we calculated earlier on. So again, that is loans. Any question? Excuse me.
No.
All right. So we're going to stop here and do our 10.2 exercise. Okay. Starting with the first one is, let's go ahead and practice our simple interest here. So 10.2, right? Simple interest. You bought a bank bond. Excuse me. Worth $225,500. Okay, with a simple interest rate of 7.45%, and can be redeemable after 3 years. How much interest will be collected at the end of 3 years? So that's the question I could be asking you. I could say, how much interest has been collected at the end of 3 years? That means I want to know what my interest is. I can also even ask you, what is your total value at the end of 3 years? That will determine that I'm looking for the future value. So in this case, let's go ahead and calculate it, right? So my simple interest formula, what is it? Okay. So what is it? It is my principal times rate times time. So let's take a look. So I have my principal of 225,500. I have an interest rate of, that's supposed to say 7.45% here. And then, so that's 0.0745. And then I have, it's redeemable in 3 years. So in this case, how much interest will I be collecting? Hello, are you guys there?
Yep, just trying to calculate it.
Okay, making sure I didn't lose the internet or anything. It was very dead silent. All right, so calculate this 225,500 times 0.0745 times 3. And
50,399.25.
excellent. That is how much interest you're going to be collecting in 3 years. Now, what's my future value going to be? What is going to be my bank bond at the end of 3 years? So again, future value is going to be my principal plus my future value. I'm sorry. Future value is going to be principal plus interest.
I want to buy an actual calculator. I like calculators better than the smartphone. I always like miss buttons and
You and me the same.
yes. Okay, oh my God. $275,899.25.
Yes, excellent. So again, because we have a bigger principal, we have a pretty high interest rate. So in this case, if I'm going to be collecting $50,000 more on that, then I would get, so basically I earned 50,000 out of this. So the future value is 275,899.25. Excellent. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at another example here. Okay. So let's practice this simple interest here. Okay. So if I have a principal of $15,000, an interest rate of 5.12%, and I have a 5 years on it, what would be my interest here? So I have 15,000 times, right? I have to convert the percentage into a decimal. And then 5 years.
3,840.
Very good. So then future value is going to be your principal plus my interest.
18,840.
Good. Now, what happens when my time is not in years? So for the second one, I have a principal of $4,521.50. Have an interest rate of 2.45%. However, it's a 90-day bond. I don't know. You're borrowing it for 90 days. Okay? What happens when I have a short term loan that is not in terms of years? How do I calculate that? So in this case, right, if I need my formula to be in terms of years, right, that's why I was mentioning this. Your time has to be in terms of years. So in this case, right, what is 90 days compared to a year?
1.5.
All right, how did you figure that out?
Because it's, I don't know.
Okay, let's break it down. So in this case, how many months are in a year?
Okay, 12.
Right, you
And
got,
it's 3 months.
yes, you got 12 months equal a year. Okay, so the next one is how many days is equal to a month?
30.
30 days equals 1 month. And in this case, you got 90 days. So how many months is that?
3.
3 months. So 3 months. So in this case, your formula would be, right? What is 3 out of 12 months?
3 twelves, which is 0.25.
It's a quarter of a year.
Ah.
So that's exactly how you calculate that. Yes. So it's a little, I mean, it's just conversions. It's not that big of a deal. But in this case,
Right.
now we know it's 3 months, right? 3 months, it's a quarter of a year. So then now that you know that, let's go ahead and calculate what your interest will be collected in a quarter of a year. So 3 months. So if I borrowed $4,521.50 and my interest rate is at 2.45%, and I know it's going to be for a quarter of the year.
$27.69.
Excellent. And what is my future value? So principal plus rate. Principal plus interest. I'm so sorry, guys.
That's okay. 4,549 and 19 cents.
Good. Now, of course, that's a short-term loan, but in this case, this is what I mean by if you're given the situation now that we have a really low interest rate, so therefore you're not going to get that much for every quarter of a year. Last example here is that you borrowed $384,125.22. Your interest rate is 7.89%, and it's for 6 months. So again, 6 months.
So it'd be 0.50.
Good, right? 6 out of 12 is going to give you 0.5.
So it's going to be 15,153 and 74 cents.
Okay. Giving you your future value to be
399,278 and 96 cents.
good. All right. So that's how you know how much interest you'll be collecting for simple interest and how much your future value will be. Okay. All right. So question number 3. Question number 3. Okay, so compound interest. So in this case, if you guys are not going to be using Excel for this, that's okay. I'll just walk you through it. Okay, so you got the principal, right? I'm sorry, the future value, which is your principal times the 1 plus 1 rate divided by number times compounded, right? Up to the number times compounded times time, and the interest is going to be future value minus principal. So in this case, you'll be able to calculate this one, the interest, but let's actually figure out what the steps that you need to take if you're going to be using Excel to solve for your future values. Okay, so in this case, if you were approved for a bank loan for $5,500 with the interest rate of 6.25% and is compounded monthly, right? And how much interest would be collected if you decided to pay it off in 5 years? Well, there you go. So let's take a look. Future value. So how we do this is we have to punch it in very carefully, right? You start every formula in Excel with an equal sign, right? That's how you activate your formula. So in this case, what's my principal? Well, I borrowed $5,500, right? I'm going to put my star, right? Because I need to multiply that. Then my first parenthesis is going to put in here. You need to put that 1 plus another open parentheses. What's my rate? That's 0.0625, right? I need to divide this by 12 months because that's my number times compounded. So as you can see, I have 2 parentheses opened right now. I have a black one and a red one. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to close my parentheses. There's my first one, the red one, and then there's the black one. Okay? And then I need to hold shift and hit that number 6. Okay? To get the caret, because that's an exponent. And then I need to open up another parentheses because here I can't just put the formula n plus n times t. Why? Because if I do that, then I'm only going to be multiplying this entire 1 plus the rate divided by the n. I'm only going to have that number be multiplied by n. And that's not what I want. I want n times t. So n is 12, and how many years I have this, we know it's 5. Okay, so that's important that you know. So, if you want to do that in your head, you can also do that, right? 12 times 5 is 60. You can also do that as well. But in this case, that's the formula you need to be punching into Excel. It's very, very specific, so you don't get a syntax error. Okay? And of course, enter, and I get $7,511.51. So therefore, what is going to be my future value? Oh, I'm sorry. What is going to be my interest? How much interest did I collect?
$2,011.51.
Good. Excellent. Okay. All right. So let's do question number 4 here. Now we're going to use this so we can compare and contrast the difference between the simple interest and the compound interest. Okay, because it's the exact same numbers. Only difference is now I get a compounded. I get calculated the interest multiple times. Okay, so in this case, same exact scenario as the simple interest, but this time let's calculate it using compound interest. So the first one is I borrowed $15,000 at an interest rate of 5.12%. I have the number times compounded. This is every quarterly, so every 3 months I get recalculated, and it's going to be redeemable in 5 years, or however you want to see this. Okay? So future value, once again, principal times parentheses 1 plus parentheses rate divided by number times compounded, so quarterly, close parentheses, your caret, open another parentheses, your N of 4 times your 5 years is going to get you $19,344.84. So how much interest have you collected?
Hello. Hi, Adam. $4,344.84.
Good, right? So what if I had a short-term loan that was only for 90 days, but I got compounded twice for those 3 months? How do I calculate that? So same thing, right? We got to go through exactly what we got to go through. So what's my principal? I borrowed the $4,521.50 times 1 plus, open parentheses, my rate of 2.45% divided by the number of times it compounded, so twice, close parentheses, close parentheses. Okay, you're going to open that parentheses, and then we're going to have the N of 2, but remember, what was 90 days?
0.25.
0.25 a year, right? It was 3 months. 3 months divided by 12 gave you 0.25 of a year. So in this case, you should get a total of $4,549.11. So what is my interest that I collected?
$27.61.
$27.61. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the last one. So once again, you borrowed that $3,084,125.22. Okay, times 1. Norman, can you mute your mic, please? Okay, so in this case, my principal is once again going to be that 384,125.22 times, right? Open parentheses 1 plus the rate. In this case, my rate is 7.89%. Divide that, and if it's compounded 3 times a year, okay, comma, comma. In this case, well, I don't have 3 years. I have 6 months, so it's going to be compounded for every month, okay? Or for every other month. So every 2 months, you're going to get compounded, right? So then you got the N, so 3, and then we know what 6 months is. 6 months out of 12 months a year is going to be 0.5. Okay? And that's going to give you 399,378.16. So in this case, how much interest is going to be collected?
$15,252.94.
Okay, good. So let's compare and contrast, right? Did we do better with compound interest or did we do better with simple interest? So the first one yielded me $4,344.84 of interest, while my simple interest only yielded me $3,840. So in this case, you definitely did significantly better with compound. Now let's compare. In this case, for simple interest here, for my second one, I got $27.69. And then let's compare. For my compound interest, I only got $27.61. So which one did you do better on? Simple interest, right? Because you got 8 more cents more, but in this case, every penny counts. And then the last one, for the big loan that you took here, you racked up $15,252.94 of interest, compared to the simple interest you got 15,153.74. So depending on how you see it, if it's a loan, then yes, you want to take the one that has less interest. But if it's a bank bond, you want the one that you got racked up more interest for. So in this case, depending on how you view it. Okay. Last question for this exercise is, we're going to be practicing what happens when we take a loan and we need to pay it off slowly and then calculate the interest on it slowly. So in this case, we're going to journalize the bank loan from example number 3. And of course, this bank loan, okay, was made on June 1st of 2020. Okay. And of course, monthly payments are variable, right? Because again, when you are the person who's borrowing the loan, are you required to pay the minimum? No, you can choose to pay more or above it. So in this case, that's why the payments are variable, but I'll show you how it affects your actual payment, your principal, right? And of course, it's due every first of the month. Okay, and of course, there are no hidden fees and no zero APR. Okay, so that means you're going to be hit with interest as soon as you can accrue interest the very following month. So no grace periods here. Okay, and of course the bank loan is effective immediately. Okay, so guys, let's journalize the first 3 months of payment. So first, let's journalize that we acquired the loan in the first place. Okay, so again, June 1st, right? We borrowed. Let's take a look at example 3 here. How much money did we borrow? We took a loan out for $5,500 with an interest rate of 6.25%, and and will be paid off in 5 years. So in this case, you borrowed $5,500. So how do I record that I borrowed $5,500?
Oh, Adam, honey, please don't do that. So sorry. What was the question?
How do you journalize that you borrowed a loan for $5,500?
Okay, so you would. Hey, babe.
Would you debit the
Okay.
loan?
Would you debit the loan? Is that what your question?
It.
Yes.
Well, no, because it's a liability, right? You owe money,
Right.
right? So
Right.
why? So if you debit a liability, you're decreasing it. I borrowed money. So what's the first thing you're gonna recognize if you borrowed money?
The cash.
You're gonna get cash. So in this case, that's exactly what you're gonna get. You're gonna have the money go into your checking account, right?
Right.
And then what happens there? Well, you borrowed the money. So how are you gonna record that you borrowed the money?
You're gonna debit.
Not debit. You have a liability now.
Okay. You're gonna credit accounts payable.
Not accounts
Would it
payable.
be?
This is
It
a
would it
this
be?
is a long term. liability.
Would it be bank securities?
Well, in this case, we borrowed a loan, right? We took a bank loan out.
Okay.
A bank loan is a liability. So this one's straightforward. There's no complicated title for a loan, right?
Mm.
So what would you put here?
Loan?
It's absolutely correct, right? Loan. Loan.
Okay.
That's why I wasn't. I was like, it's
Staring us in the face.
yes, it's a loan, right? You borrowed money from the bank. So in return, now that you increase your liabilities, what are you getting out of it? You borrowed money. So therefore, you got money in the bank. Okay? So of course, now that you got that loan, right, for $5,500. Okay? Now, are you going to be accruing interest as soon as you get the loan? So upon no, right? Because you haven't accrued it, right? You just got the loan. So there's no way that you're going to get accrued interest because it hasn't been sitting there, right? So in this
Right.
case, there you go. That's the first thing that we're going to recognize is that we got the loan. So if that's, so here's the first row right here. That so that's the first one right there. That I borrowed the money for $5,500. Now, what's my rate going to be? It's at 6.25%, right? But in this case, if I'm going to be compounded every single month, how much is my rate going to be? So remember, your rate is an annual percentage, 6.25% per year. So how do I figure out how much interest I'd be charging for just the month?
Divided by 12.
Good. You're going to divide the 6.25 by 12. And that's going to give you your monthly interest. So how much is your monthly interest?
0.005.
Correct, right? Because it's 6% for 12 months, right? So that you're essentially going to be calculating 0.5% per month, right?
Okay.
So in this case, right, simple, straightforward. How much interest would I be collecting for the month of July? Because again, I don't accrue for June, right? Because I just got the loan. So this, what I'm doing right now is I'm calculating what it's going to be for the month of July.
2865.
2865, right? All you got to do is you're going to be calculating the principal times the rate. So in this case, 5,500 multiplied by this 0.005%. And that's going to give me $28.65. Okay? So that means my current balance is going to be, how much money do I owe now?
5,500.
55 plus the interest.
2865.
Correct. So that's how much I'm going. That's what I'm going to be receiving in the bill as of July, right? That I racked up that much interest. So if I decide to pay on July 1st, $200, how much is going to actually go towards my principal? So in this case, let's go ahead and journalize that. I'm going to make a payment as of July 1st, right? It says here that payments are made every first of the month. So if I make a payment, okay, so it's July 1st, right? I'm making a payment to my loan. Okay, so how do I record that?
Payment?
I'm
You're
paying
gonna,
off
you're
my
gonna,
loan.
So
okay, you're gonna credit,
checking.
Yes, you're going to credit your checking account, right? Because you're making a payment, right? How much am I going to pay this for the month of July?
200.
You're going to pay $200. Good. Okay? Now, I'm paying off my loan. How do I reduce my loan?
you're gonna debit loan expense.
Correct. Well, in this case, it's not an expense, but you
I mean,
are going to be paying off your loan. Yes.
okay.
Okay? Now, what is rule of thumb when you're making a payment on a loan? What else you are also paying?
The interest,
You're paying the interest. So good. So you have interest expense. This is the expense
okay.
account. Okay? So, how much interest are you going to pay first?
The 2865,
$28.65. Good. So then how much money is actually going to go towards your principal? How much of your $200 payment? Go ahead.
$171.35.
Excellent. So in this case, right, I'm only paying $171 towards my principal. I have to cover the interest first. Okay? So in this case, what would your new current balance be if I made a payment of $200? Okay, so I owe right now $5,528.65. And I paid $200. So what's my new principal going to be?
$5,328.63.
65 cents. Okay. So now that's my new principal. So what happens next? I need to know how much interest I'm going to be racking up for the month of July. So, month of July, what's my interest rate going to be?
Okay. Is it going to be the same?
Correct. It is going to be the same because, like I said, we took that 6.25% and divided by 12, right? So therefore, this formula will stay the same. Okay, you're going to be multiplying 0.5% every single month. So this time, right, the only difference here is my principal is different. So let's calculate how much interest is going to be collected for the month of July. If my principal is $5,328.65.
Okay, would it be $27.75?
Excellent. So therefore, what's my bill going to tell me how much that I owe? Plus the interest.
5,356.40.
Good. So then, new bill. So if I were to pay $250, right, for my August 1st, my payment, how much am I going to be making a payment towards my interest and how much am I going to make a payment towards my principal? Okay, so I'm making a payment as of August 1st, right? Same thing. I'm going to pay my loan plus my interest, and it's going to come out of my checking account. Okay. Okay. So in this case, I'm making a payment. So this time for August, let's say I pay $250.
$222.25.
All right. So then the interest, we know we already calculated was that $27.75, right? So
Yep.
we're gonna actually be paying a total of that $222.25 towards my actual principal. Okay. So then, what's my new principal going to be then? If I made a payment of $250, what is going to be my new principal?
$5,106.40.
All right, so let's go ahead and do the next one. So how much interest would I be collecting as of August?
2660.
Okay, and therefore,
$55,133.
good. So now, September, you decide to pay $300. Okay, so how much money is going to go towards the principal and how much is going to go towards the interest? So same thing, right? We're going to make a payment as of September 1st here. Okay, so same thing. You're going to make a payment to your loan. You're going to make a payment to your interest. And you're going to make a actual payment. So in this case, if I'm going to pay $300 this time, right? How much was the interest that I collected for the month of August?
2660.
$26.60. So how much money is actually going to go towards my principal?
$273.40.
Okay, $273.40. So again, that is how we are going to be managing our loans. This is what happens every time you make a payment. So again, let's take a look. So every month that we made a payment, right? We started very low, so we end up paying low. But because we kept increasing our payments higher, right, then the actual money is actually going towards our principal. So as you can see, right, when we paid $250, it's now $222. And then when we increase our payment to $300, it's $273. So yes, technically, if you don't want to go through the second payment, then double up your payment, right? You'll pay it off a lot quicker, but still, your interest is still going to be racked up. Okay. All right. Any questions in regards to interest?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. So it should be exactly 10:03. So I'm going to round that to 10:05.